Joshua built an altar unto Jehovah, the God of Israel, in Mount Ebal. Now this takes us right back to what Moses told Joshua to do. He got to Mount Ebal. This is at Shechem. This is Mount Gerizim, or Har Bahal, the Mount of Blessing in Mount Ebal. And so he built an altar to Jehovah there, just as Moses had commanded him. And it was written in the book of the law of Moses. This is exactly what it says in Deuteronomy. An altar of whole stones over which no man has ever lifted up any iron, and they offered there burnt offerings unto Jehovah, and they sacrificed peace offerings. And he wrote there upon the stones a copy of the Torah of Moses. Now this isn't Genesis all the way through Deuteronomy. This is the law that Moses laid out. This is Deuteronomy laying out there a copy on the stones, and he wrote it in the presence of all the children of Israel. And all of Israel, their elders, their officers, their judges, they stood on this side of the ark and on that side before the priests, the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant of Jehovah, as well as the strangers. And he that was born among them. Half of them were over against Mount Gerizim, upon which the Samaritan, the remains of the Samaritan temple is there. And the other half of them over on the other side, Mount Ebal. And just as Moses had commanded them. And that they should bless the people of Israel. Remember, there were 12 verses of blessings for Israel, and there were 52 verses of curses against Israel. And after he did that, he read all the words of the Torah, the blessings and the cursings, to all that was written in the book of the law, and there was not a single word of all that Moses commanded, which Yehoshua did not read before all the congregation of Israel. After the blessings and the cursings were laid out before the children of Israel, including the mixed multitude, the strangers, the hewers of wood, the drawers of water, all those who had joined themselves to Israel. And just as Moses had in the covenant of Moab, just before going across, sending the children of Israel across with Yehoshua, now Yehoshua does exactly what Moses says to do, and now it is time to take the land. And all of the kings that were on this side of Jordan, we read in Joshua chapter 9, verse 1, in the hills, the valleys, the coast, over against the great sea, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Hivites, all these people, they gathered together to fight against Joshua and Israel, and they all came together with one accord. And it says that when the inhabitants of Gibeon means a hill city, it's about 5 miles away from Jerusalem, literally a city set on a hill that cannot be hid. When the inhabitants of Gibeon heard about this, then they worked a wily thing. What they did is they pretended that they were ambassadors. They took some old sacks and saddled their asses, got some old wineskins and old shoes and some old stale bread that had been out for a long time, and they pretended like they were coming from this far country. The bread was all moldy, and then they came to Israel and said, we want to make a league with you. We want to make an agreement with you. We come for a long distance. And so they tricked the children of Israel and said, we came from a long way, and in verse 9 and following, we came from a very far country, your servants have come, because we've heard the name of Yehovah, your Elohim, and the fame of him, and everything that he did, and the 2 kings, to Sihon and to Og in Bashan, which was at Ashtaroth, or the city of Easter. And so we went to come to you and say that we want to join in with you. We don't want to fight against you. And it went on to talk about the cities that they were from. And so they made an agreement with them. and said, okay, you can join in with us. You can join in with us, and this is exactly what Israel was told, that these nations, other nations, if they willingly submit to you, they don't attack you, leave them alone. So they pretended that they were of these nations. And so it turns out that Joshua finds out who they really are. And in verse 22, it says, Joshua called him and said, why have you beguiled us? You're not a long way from us. You dwell right here in the land. Now, therefore, you are cursed. None of you will ever be freed from being a bondman and hewers of wood and drawers of water for the house of my God. Well, that's a lot better than dying. They're going to be in servitude for all of their generations. They're not going to be allowed to come into the congregation. And so verse 27, Joshua made them that day the hewers of wood and drawers of water for the congregation and for the altar of Yahovah. Now, chapter 10, verse 1, it came to pass when Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, then he got together the other kings in the area. Now, Adonai-Zedek means my Lord is righteous, but don't think that my Lord is righteous means that he's a worshiper of the true God. It's like George Harrison singing My Sweet Lord. So My Sweet Lord, oh, that sounds like a real good Christian song. Let's all sing it along until he gets into this Hare Krishna mantra with this nonsense about this fictitious Indian god. And then you find out that, My Sweet Lord can mean anything. It can mean Krishna, Buddha, Kali, the goddess of death, and all that stuff. My Lord is righteous doesn't mean anything. Anyone, the devils believe in God and they tremble, but they don't obey him. They don't do what he says. But it says that this king, Adonai-Zedek, got together all these other kings and they went and attacked Gibeon. Because Gibeon made an alliance with Israel. And so we're going to go kill him. And so Gibeon says to Israel, wait, we made this league with you. We're friends with you, and please help us. And so Joshua said, okay. And it's more than Joshua. In verse 8 it says, and Yahovah said unto Yahushua, fear them not, for I have delivered all these kings into your hand. There shall not one of them stand before us. And it came to pass, verse 11, as they fled from before Israel to the going down to Beth Horon, that Yahovah cast down great stones from heaven upon them, and they died. And there are more people that died from the hailstones than whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. And they then spoke Yehoshua to Yahovah in that day, that he delivered the Amorites before the children of Israel, and he said to them in the sight of Israel, sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ayalon. And the sun stood still, the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hastened not to go down about a whole day. And it says that there was not another day like it, before or after it, that Yahovah hearkened unto the voice of a man. For Yahovah fought for Israel, and Israel was fighting for Gentiles. That's who they were fighting for. Gentiles who joined themselves, and even though they're in the position of slavery, the Almighty listened, and, from their perspective, the sun stood still. From the earth's perspective, the rotation of the earth stopped. How can the Almighty stop the rotation of the earth and everything remain the same? Well, I don't know that Sir Isaac Newton figured that one out, but the scriptures tell us this is exactly what transpired. It's never happened since, it's never happened before, but to avenge themselves on their enemy, they needed the daylight to be able to do it, and when Joshua cried out, that is when the sun stood still.
O sun, stand still over Gibeon. O moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. As it is written in the book of Jasher, the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since. Now, many people consider this a complete myth. It is just a Jewish folk tale in an attempt to boost their link with a miracle-working God. However, Geradas Bauer has collected stories of a long day or a long night from several tribes from around the world. Let me just give you a few examples. In Egypt, the Greek historian Herodotus recorded that when he visited Egypt, the priests there showed him an ancient manuscript that told the story of a day that lasted twice as long as a normal day. As they had accurate water clocks, they could record time. They could easily, therefore, record that a long day had taken place. And there are similar references to a long day in both China and in India. Several North American Indian tribes have accounts of long nights. The Ojibways, Wyandots, and the Bungis tell of a long night. The Omahas tell of the sun being caught in a rabbit's trap and only released just before dawn. The Dogroods tell of the sun suddenly becoming dark at noon. Similarly, in South America, the Mexicans, Aztecs, Mayans, and Peruvians, and in West Africa also, there are stories of a long night. Now, some may think that these stories have arisen because of the superstitious nature of ancient people. So if so, there would be surely a random distribution. One tribe might have fabricated a story of a long day, and a few miles away, another tribe might have a story of a long night. But that is not what we find, because there are two interesting features of these stories. First of all, if you plot the stories on a map of the world, you see quite quickly that they are gathered into two areas. The long day stories are gathered in one area, Egypt, China, and India, and in the second area, North and South America, there are stories of a long night. Now you can plot the shadow of night and day as it travels around the world, and at that time of the year it is like a sine wave, a curve that rises to the north hemisphere and then falls to the south and then goes back to the north again as it travels round the earth. Now it is possible to move this shadow to such a position that the shadow of night completely covers all the long night stories, and the daylight part of the curve on the upper section covers all the long day stories. Therefore, these stories cannot be random local myths, but a worldwide event that actually happened and is recorded in the folk stories of those people that actually experienced it. Now, the other point is that the exact position of the shadow is not certain. It can be moved within certain limits. However, there is one point that defines just where that shadow should be. Sir James Fraser records that on a hillside on an eastern island of Fiji, the natives tie the weeds together, quote, to stop the sun going down, as it is said that it once did. This places the edge of the shadow at this point, giving a more accurate position for where the sun stood still. From this, Geradas Bauer calculates that the time was about 9 a.m. in Israel. Now, using the historic dates from these tribes, Bauer calculated that it was May the 18th to the 15th in 1448 BC, and that it started at about 9 a.m. for Joshua's long day to begin.